Miss Susan wanted me to tell you a story that doesn't have any pictures to go with it and see if you could come up with some for it. So here we go. Okay? This story actually happened to me. Okay? It happened some years ago when I was traveling. I was traveling through Europe. It's on the other side of the ocean. I just wanted to see what was going on there. And as I traveled through, I came to a little kingdom hidden away in the mountains. And I wanted to see what it was like, so I went and visited it. And when I got there, I ran into kind of a problem. And that problem was I was out of money. It's hard to go traveling if you don't have any money. It's hard to eat if you don't have any money. Because I didn't have anybody there to buy food for me. So I thought, okay, I could do two things. One, I could go find the job, which I didn't want to do. Or two, I could go ask somebody for food. I decided to do that. And I decided that the best place to go to would be the palace. Not to the front of the palace. No. I'm not going to go up and ask the king for food. That's silly. He didn't have time to talk to me. But I would decide I would go around, not to the front, but to the back, where all the servants live. They always have more food than they know what to do with. They're throwing some of it out, and so I can just go and ask them for some food. I'm sure they wouldn't turn away a hungry traveler, would they? Well, these ones probably would. Because when I went around to the back, and I looked around for what looked like it might be the door to the kitchen. But when I got close, it opened, and a man came flying out of it. Not because he was flapping his arms, because he'd been just thrown out. He'd been thrown out by the cook. The cook was this huge man, bald, really, really big and strong looking, and really mean looking. And I came up and looked at the man that he had thrown out, and the cook had said, "If I ever see you here again, I'll cut you up and turn you into a casserole." So this didn't look like a great place to get food. So I ran over to the man who had been thrown out just to see if he was okay. He was a beggar. A beggar. You know what a beggar is? Somebody who has no job and can't get one for whatever reason, and so he has to sit on the street and ask people for help. Well, I went to check up on him because you should always stop and help a beggar whenever you can, because, well, everyone knows that beggars aren't always what they seem to be. But I stopped to check up on this poor beggar. He looked like he was okay, although he had, when he had landed on the ground, he had hurt his leg on a rock. But as I stepped down, as I reached down to help him, the cook saw me and said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Nothing much, sir. I've just been passing through, and I just came to see if you had any food to give away." The cook said, "Absolutely not. I'm not here to help every well, I can't tell you the word that he used because it's a bad word. But I'm not here to help every loser who comes by looking for food." Well, I reached down, I helped the beggar up, and as I did, I reached down so the cook couldn't see me and grabbed that rock that the beggar had tripped on. I helped him back up, and I said, "Well, I guess if you can't help me, then my friend the beggar here and we're just going to have stone soup for dinner again." And the cook looked at me and went, "Stone soup? How do you get soup from a stone?" I was in luck. This wasn't a very bright cook. Not a whole lot going on in there. I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, my friend. Let us in, and I will cook you up a batch of my world-famous stone soup. As long as you promise to share a bowl with us, I will cook you up a stove soup, and it'll be the best soup you ever had in your life. And for a minute, I didn't think the cook was going to fall for it. But finally he went, all right, come on in. And so he went in, the beggar, and I followed him. I gave the stone to my friend the beggar and told him to go wash it, which he did. And then I came, and he brought it back, I took that stone, and I plopped it into a big pot of boiling water that was on the fire. And then I stirred it for a little while, and then I tasted it. You know what it tasted like? It tasted like hot water, because that's all it was, hot water with a rock in it. But when the cooks came over to look at me, and I said, it's looking really good. Hey, do you have any salt? And the cook said, salt! And they brought some salt over, and I put it in the water. I stirred it around. I tasted it again. Well, now it tasted like salt water. But I said, it's really good. Hey, do you have any potatoes? And the cook said, potatoes! And one of the other cooks in the kitchen brought some potatoes over, and I cut them up and washed them and put them into the pot. Stirred it around for a little bit. It's coming along really good. Hey, do you have any carrots? And the cook said, carrots! And they brought some carrots, and beggar and I washed them, cut them up, put them into the pot. Can you figure out what we were doing? You cannot get soup from a stone. But you can get soup from salt and potatoes and carrots and meat and all a bunch of the other stuff. What I was doing is was pretending that it was coming from the stone when actually I was borrowing all the stuff from this not too smart cook so I could make the soup. And after I made it, it was just regular old beef soup. I poured a bowl for the cook and for the beggar and for me. We all sat down to eat it. And it was really good because I know how to cook beef soup. And the cook liked it, although he pretended not to. I could see that he really did. And so I got a meal out of it. My friend the beggar got a meal out of it. And I got to feel pretty good about myself because I had fooled this cook. And that's when the trouble started. See, trouble always starts whenever I start feeling too good about myself. Because I said there were other cooks in the kitchen, and they saw what had happened, and they were laughing. And the head cook said, what are you laughing at? And we said, oh yeah, we're just laughing at this wonderful stone. This stone that can make soup. Along with salt and carrots and potatoes and beef and the cook started to realize that he'd been tricked. And he said, wait a minute. Something's going on here. Let me see that stone. I said, certainly, sir. And I went out and got my spoon, went over to the pot, and I fished that stone out. Now, this stone had been sitting on that pot. That pot had been sitting in that fire. So the stone was really, really, really hot. So I brought it over to the cook and said, here you go. And I quickly flipped my spoon over and slapped that red hot stone right in the cook's hand. And the cook went, ah! And I grabbed the beggar and I said, run, we got to get out of here. And we ran for the door. The cook was shaking his hand and screaming because it hurt. And when he saw us running, he grabbed one of his big knives and came running out after us. My friend the beggar and I, we ran for the door. But as we got close, the beggar tripped. And he fell down. And I ran back. I grabbed the beggar, hauled him up, dragged him to the door, and threw him out. I helped the beggar get away. Because that's the kind of nice guy I am. But because I did that means I had to slow down. And I had slowed down so much that the cook came running up and he jumped on top of me and knocked me to the ground. And he started screaming all these things at me that, again, I'm not going to tell you because, well, you don't need to hear those. Well, after he's done screaming at me, he hauled me up and he dragged me out that door and he dragged me down to where the king was. The king was in his throne room. He was on his throne. The queen was on her throne. And their prince, their son, who would have been about 4 or 5, he was sitting there on his little throne. And there were a whole bunch of other people there in the throne room, but the cook didn't care. He dragged me down. He threw me down in front of the king, and he said, "Your Majesty, I want this man dead." And he started to tell the king everything that I had done to him. How I had tricked him and how I had hurt him and how I had stolen food from him. And he went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I could see the king sitting there looking really bored. But, the king was doing his job. He listened to the cook. After the cook was done, the king turned to me and said, "Well, sir, explain yourself. Who are you? And what do you do?" Now, I knew I had to be careful. I had to be careful because if I made the king mad, he might decide to kill me, or he might give me over to the cook, which would be even worse. So I decided instead of crying or throwing myself down and begging for his mercy, I decided to be a little different about this. I said, "Your Majesty, I'm a traveler, a teller of stories, a singer of songs, and a lover of beautiful women. I'm a man of knowledge. I have been around the world and I have learned many different secrets. I know 7 words in Latin. I know 15 ways to kill a giant and 3 ways to kill a dragon. I know how to fight dirty but not fair. I am the only one of me in the world. You can get cooks anywhere, but there's only one of me. And surely your Majesty is so wise and so caring that he knows that to do anything to me would be just a horrible thing you could do." Well, a lot of other people would probably have found that a little bit annoying, but I thought I could tell what kind of person the king was, and I was right. The king thought that I was being funny. And he laughed a little bit, and then he said, "Very well, storyteller. Since you're so good at talking, this will be your punishment. You will live here in the palace for 1 year. Every night after our evening meal, you will come into this room where I will be seated, and you will tell me a story. You will tell a story to myself, the queen, the prince, and anyone else who happens to be here. You must tell a different story every night, and they must all be interesting. Every night that you tell a story, I will give you 1 gold coin. But if at any night you don't tell me a story, or you tell me a story you've already told me, then I will give you to the cook, and he will take you to the kitchen and throw you into his pot of boiling oil." And I said, "Just as your Majesty wishes. You are wise and generous and fair." And so for a year, that's what I did. I lived there in the palace. I got my own room. I got nice clothes because you can't stand in front of the king with bad clothes. Every night after the king had finished his meal, I went into his room and I told him a story. Every night. And I had so many stories. Some were stories of kings, and some were stories of queens, and some were stories of regular people. Some were stories of animals, and some were stories of spirits. Some were stories of heroes and some were stories of villains. But all of them were interesting. And every night, the king gave me a gold piece. And every night I would take that back to my room and put it in a little bag under my bed. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. I had a place to live, I had nice clothes, I had good food to eat, and all I had to do was tell a story every night. What a wonderful punishment. I even got married. I did. I was very popular with the king and with his nobles, and there was a woman there called Fiona, and I married her. Whew, what a woman. And so it was, the days passed by. For 1 year I did this, and we come down to the last day of my sweet, sweet punishment. I woke up, and it was an absolutely gorgeous day. The sun was shining, there was a nice cool breeze coming off the mountains. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. And I woke up, I stretched my arms, I breathed that wonderful air. I had no story for that night. I had used up all my stories. I was supposed to tell a new story to the king every night, but I just realized I'd used up all my stories. This was the last day, and I was a story short.